Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Over 40 years ago, there was one comedian unlike any other that was using jokes to tell the truth about politicians, corruption, and even the actual truth behind wars.
Open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore. The owners of the country they got their election. They said, we're going to get this election. We put you people in that court for a reason.
All right,
Now's
back
the time
to earth for you now.
Yeah, forget all that stupid. Will you? They're openly driving the bus, and we're all in the back.
There is no national conspiracy to buy elections and control America. Now talk about back to earth.
You don't need a formal conspiracy.
Right.
When interests converge, these people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice. Right. You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
So much, in fact, that once we take a look at what's happening in 2026, his words sound eerily almost like prophecy. Welcome back to another episode of Didi Got a Podcast, and of course, I'm your host, Didi. I appreciate you all for tuning in. As always, please hit the like button on your way in. In today's episode, we will be taking a look back at comedian George Carlin, who was already sounding the alarm back in the 1970s about politicians, power, and endless wars during his stand-up routine. But before that, I need to update everyone on what's taking place as of March of 2026 on the world stage. And in order to do that, I'm going to take everybody back to 2011 so we can go on a little bit of a journey together. Because in 2011, at the height of an alleged conflict between the US and Iran,
in Iran, we see where the path of a violent and unaccountable ideology leads.
Donald Trump infamously said this about President Obama.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
Well, several years later in 2016, the then presidential candidate Donald Trump would infamously state this about President George Bush.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
The 2 former presidents, Trump was very adamant about their decisions and his predictions pertaining to the war in the Middle East. But as we know, that actually never happened. In fact, according to former U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Israel tried to pressure Barack Obama into bombing Iran, saying, "We will bomb Iran with or without you." And Obama resisted.
Look, this has been a long story when it comes to Iran. And back during the Obama administration, the Israelis were pushing President Obama to take military action against Iran, and were warning that they would do it themselves if he didn't. And he wouldn't, because he thought the better way to get at the nuclear program, which is what we were focused on, was through very muscular diplomacy backed up by very, very strong sanctions that we rallied the world to put in place. And then we got the Iran nuclear agreement.
That brings us to June of 2025. Just 3 months before the Charlie Kirk incident would take place in Utah, the U.S. would target and strike Iran's nuclear hubs, leading to President Trump confidently stating the obvious.
So Iran wants to meet. As you know, their sites were obliterated. They're very evil nuclear sites. Now has been proven. We had some fake news for a little while that delayed the credit that our great pilots and these great what talent that was, and they hit it right down in the spot.
Nonetheless, just 9 months later, after Charlie Kirk, who was vehemently opposed to the regime change war, is no longer here, the U.S. has gone on to do the very thing President Trump accused other presidents of doing, starting another war in the Middle East.
They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their, in some cases, allies, or not so long ago allies. And, you know, it's really a nation that was out of control, and they would have used it on us if we let them.
And the worst part, we have good reason to believe that it was on behalf of another foreign country in the Middle East, not America first.
And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
2 seconds later.
Israel was going to strike Iran, and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked a question.
No, were you the one that, because somebody asked me a question yesterday, did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that, that follow-up. And I said, no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
This then resulted in the U.S. allegedly bombing a school in Iran, unaliving 175 children, a fact that President Trump will go on to blatantly lie about with his defense secretary right behind him.
Did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
Based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hickson? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Just to later backtrack, claiming that he actually just made it up.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
How is this a real clip? How is this a real president? How is this real life? And to make matters even worse, the sudden and radical flip-flopping from Donald Trump and him doing the opposite of what he ran on in his campaign over the past few years, that is him claiming to be the peace president, him, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, and the list goes on. This has caused so many people in his base to abandon the entire movement, some of the loudest, some of the biggest platforms, even including some people that did jail time behind the movement.
Think killing innocent children, if that doesn't bother you, then there's something wrong with you. In fact, there's something so deeply wrong with you, you really shouldn't even be involved in politics.
Trump has done, he's done the sin of George H.W. Bush, only magnitude larger. Because, you know, those of us old enough to recall, George H.W. Bush made this bold promise in his presidential campaign, but afterward, when he replaced Ronald Reagan, was no new taxes. Read my lips. Well, Donald Trump campaigned in 2024, where he said that his foreign policy would bring stability to the world. And in rally after rally, he promised to turn the page forever on those foolish, stupid days of never-ending wars. He criticized the Obama administration and the Biden administration and even the George W. Bush administration for prolonged conflicts that drained U.S. resources. And he kept saying, I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars. How did that age? He is now, I predict, he will be impeached, he will be convicted, and he'll be removed from office. He will not complete his term. And other members of his administration, including this dummy Hegseth, will also be impeached. They have taken the United States to war without the Congress approving it.
But it gets worse as Australian Senator Nick McKim goes viral as he rips apart the US and Israel for the lack of empathy in this war.
I mean, aren't you embarrassed? This is the guy you've hitched us to at the hip. I mean, he is a fascist, war criminal, fantasist, and you have hitched our country at the hip to him through AUKUS, through your obsequious toadying of the war criminals Trump and Netanyahu and their illegal war. It is humiliating, it's embarrassing, and it's degrading.
But why is this important? Because I'm wanting to drive home the point that when we say left versus right is a scam, many people still seem to struggle to understand that. And maybe it's due to the strong innate desire that we have for hope and change for this country and the world that politicians are well aware of and continue to manipulate people into believing that they will actually do something about it, but they won't, because the truth is both sides are actually just one side pretending to be against each other at the expense of you, the people, allegedly. And this brings us to the comedian George Carlin, who back in the 1970s spoke on politics quite a number of times. And I've always heard that the best comedians are not the ones that can distract you from everyday real life with jokes and making you laugh. No, the best comedians are typically the ones that remind you about real life while making you laugh. And that is exactly what George Carlin did. Except the sad thing, or maybe the not so sad thing, depending on how you look at it, is that he was doing this over 40 years ago, and the very things he said about both Democrats and Republicans applied then, and it still applies till today. So much, in fact, that it's almost as if he predicted it. Let's take a listen to some of the most viral things George Carlin ever said about politics, and let's see if we can apply that to what we're seeing today.
You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. You know the difference I define the difference between right wing and left wing. People to the right of center, well, let's start with the people to the left. People to the left of center, liberals, Democrats, populists, they're interested in people, human beings and human values. People to the right of the line, Republicans and rich people and right wingers, they're interested in property, not people. And they're soulless. They're without soul. They don't really care. These Christians don't do Jesus' work, which is to feed the poor and take care of the ones who can't help themselves. That's what their Jesus said. Feed those who have no way. To take ones who have nothing going for them. Help them in my name. Don't even want to know about it. Where's that tax return? I want my what do they call it?
And not that you can help it. I mean, the problem is really with the people you cover. The politicians, the celebrities, and the lawyers. And although their level of insincerity is astonishing, it's still kind of fun to hear them talk. In particular, it's fun to listen to Washington talk. Whenever the issue of term limits comes up, I always tell people the only term limits I'm interested in would be to limit some of the terms used by politicians. They speak, of course, with great caution because they must take care not to actually say anything. Proof of this, according to their own words, is that they don't actually say things, they indicate them. As I indicated yesterday, and as the president indicated to me, but sometimes they don't indicate, they suggest. Let me suggest that, as I indicated yesterday, I haven't determined that yet.
But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting by a system that threw them overboard 30 years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
George Carlin, in my opinion, yes, I didn't agree with everything that he said. However, I do believe that he told a lot of truth. I do believe that he was preparing a lot of people. I do believe that he warned a lot of people. And yet, we still don't get it. And I believe the best way to end this video off is to state this. We the people, until we realize the power that we have and we can collectively come together, which is going to become much and much more difficult to do that, as we had the Patriot Act that was implemented back in like 2001 or whenever it was, or after 2001, with many of us believing that a false flag could be on its way once again, maybe sometime this year, which I've been saying I feel that that's going to be coming for well over 7 months now. Hopefully I'm wrong, prayerfully I'm wrong, but if I'm not, if another false flag was to take place, or alleged false flag was to take place, as some are alleging that this may take place in California, then we have reason to believe that Patriot Act 2.0, which some could argue is already in implementation, will only continue to strip us of our rights and will make it much more difficult for the people to be able to collectively come together to overthrow our... I'm on YouTube. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. If you caught that, you caught that. But we have to make a decision sooner or later what we're going to do about these politicians who get into office and pretend as if we work for them when it's always the other way around. Y'all up in the comment section and let me know what you think about all of this. Does the stand-ups from George Carlin, which I'm sure many of you have seen it already, do they make the hairs on your skin crawl? How do you feel when you watch these clips? What are your thoughts? Hop in the comment section and let me know. I'll catch you all on the next one. I'm Demetrius. I go by Didi. Peace.
Oh yeah, Didi got a podcast.